Good evening, everyone. This is Erin O'Toole, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm pleased to welcome you to our telephone town hall tonight and to let you know we're also live on Facebook and YouTube. Tonight, we're talking with people across the Greater Toronto Area, my backyard. We're talking about the path to recovery and how Canada's Conservatives will secure the future. You will have a chance to ask me any question you have about this election and any question you might have about Canada's recovery plan, our plan to get our economy back on track, our country back on its feet after COVID-19. So if you have a question for me, please press *3 on your phone now. Or if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, use the comments to ask your question. It's great to be back in the GTA. I grew up in Bowmanville and in Port Perry in the suburbs to the east of Toronto. My dad worked at the General Motors plant in Oshawa. As I said, I graduated from Bowmanville High School, went to school in Bowmanville and Port Perry, and then worked in Toronto in my professional career. I've lived in the region most of my life, and I know that the Greater Toronto Area in Southern Ontario is a great place to live, work, raise your family, and retire. That's why, like my parents, my wife Rebecca and I chose to raise our kids in the region. I know that GTA families are worried about the future, worried about skyrocketing housing prices, endless gridlock, the cost of living, and hospital wait times. It's about time we had a Prime Minister who personally knows and understands the challenges facing families in the GTA. I will be your voice in Ottawa as Prime Minister, and I want to be very clear right off the top. Having an election right now in a pandemic is frankly reckless. Just this week, Mr. Trudeau was campaigning in a hospital. Rather than focusing on an election, the Prime Minister of our country should be thinking on how to best meet the threat of a Delta-driven fourth wave, how to secure our economic recovery for small business owners in the GTA, how to tackle the skyrocketing cost of living that Canadian families are facing. After so many years of over-promising and under-delivering for Toronto, for the suburbs, Mr. Trudeau is thinking he should be rewarded with a majority in this election. There may be 4 parties on the ballot, but there are really only 2 choices in this election: Canada's Conservatives or more of the same. Mr. Trudeau, along with Mr. Singh and the NDP, they have an agenda of more borrowing, more debt, higher taxes, and rising prices. Canada's Conservatives will stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families. That's why we're running on Canada's recovery plan, a plan to get Canada's economy firing on all cylinders. It's our plan to secure 1 million jobs that were lost during the pandemic and more. It's to have accountability by introducing tough new anti-corruption laws. It's about showing mental health leadership by implementing our Canada Mental Health Action Plan. It's about securing our capacity to be more prepared in the future for future pandemics and threats. And finally, our 5th pillar is about securing the economy and balancing the federal budget over the next decade. Canada's Conservatives will secure the future of every community in our region and across Canada. If you have any questions on Canada's recovery plan, hit *3 or add your question to the comments. And I'm so proud to be speaking to families, small business owners, and retirees in the GTA, alongside a good friend of mine, someone that I had the good pleasure of serving in the House of Commons with and in Cabinet with, the Honourable John Baird, who's moderating this tonight. Take it away, John.
Thank you very much, Erin. I'm John Baird. I've had the honour of previously serving as Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs and a Member of Parliament from right here in Ontario, and I'll be your moderator tonight. I support Erin O'Toole's vision for Canada. As he said, Erin was raised in Bowmanville, Ontario, with the middle-class values of hard work and helping your neighbour. Before his career in politics, he served our country in the Royal Canadian Air Force for more than a dozen years. Erin stands up for hardworking Canadians. He wants to work for you, and as a parent of 2, he wants to make sure that for generations to come, Canadians can grow up with world-class services such as healthcare, a thriving economy, and secure finances. The telephone town hall is about to start, so please press *3 to ask Erin a question or comment below if you're watching it on Facebook. Again, if you have a question for Erin O'Toole directly, please press *3 now or comment below if you're watching us on Facebook. So let's get started and go right to the phones. We have Jillian from Uxbridge, and Jillian wants to talk about seniors and the rising cost of food. Jillian, please go ahead.
Oh, hi. I'm a senior in Uxbridge, and every week when I go shopping, the groceries are like $10 more. The grocery stores are ripping the seniors off, and we are having a very difficult time in existing now. So, Erin, I've known you. I lived in Newcastle, and I know that you're a good person. And what can we do to help?
Well, thanks so much, Jillian.
Thank you.
Erin.
Thank you, Jillian. Yes, I'm very honored that I've been able to be your member of parliament, both in Newcastle and when I represented Uxbridge for a time. And a former advisor to me and a former councillor from Uxbridge, Jacob Mantle, is our candidate. Will make a great MP for Pickering Uxbridge. And Canada's recovery plan, Jillian, is about giving Canadians a break, particularly seniors on fixed income. They're seeing their pensions remain flat and cost of living skyrocket across the GTA, and groceries, as you said, we've seen that skyrocket. 10% increases in some categories. Canadians spending hundreds, if not thousands more over the year for their grocery bills. So we want to give Canadians a break. We're going to introduce a grocery code of conduct and actually try and put downward pressure on prices in the large grocery chains. We've been fighting for that for over a year. We're going to try and keep your costs down for internet, for cellular rates as well. We're going to have a GST holiday, Jillian, in December to give Canadians a break and to give bricks and mortar retailers a break, because to get that GST savings, you're going to have to make a purchase in a bricks and mortar store, not online. We're also going to provide more relief for seniors to stay in their home. We're going to double the Canadian Workers Benefit for some seniors who are transitioning out of the workforce into a more part-time job. And we're going to make historic investments into long-term care by providing a $3 billion fund that the provinces can draw upon to make improvements for long-term care. So, Jillian, I want you to know Canada's recovery plan is about giving our seniors and giving families a break. Mr. Trudeau's making the cost of living crisis worse. Canada's Conservatives are going to deal with it and get prices down.
Erin, our next question is from John. He wants to know about the Liberals' plan on taxing homes. John.
Hello, Erin. The rumor is that the Liberals are planning on taxing the home that you're living in now, your main home. Not that you have any for rental or anything like that. That's automatic, that you have to pay capital gains, I believe. But on our own home, we're both seniors now, and we kind of depend on, if we have to sell our residence, that we're going to use that money. That may have to put us in a home, in another smaller home, or whatever. Is there any truth that they want to tax any profit you make on your principal residence?
Erin, that's a great question. What do you say?
Thanks, John. This is a concern we share and we hear all the time, because the Liberals have asked CMHC to provide a study on taxing home equity, and they've been tracking home values through CRA, the revenue agency. And so it concerns us, because that would be kind of an attack on the middle class, which use that exemption from capital gains in the primary residence as a way of saving for retirement, is exactly as you described it, John, so that you can use that equity to make sure that you can plan for your retirement if you transition into a smaller home or eventually into some sort of retirement home. You have to be able to rely on that nest egg, and we will fight tooth and nail against any move to put in place some sort of home equity tax. There have been some advisors and supporters of the Liberals that have been advocating for this, and their reckless spending has a lot of us worried that that's what they have on the horizon. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has said that Mr. Trudeau, on the path he's on, there would be no balance to the federal books until 2070. We have a plan in Canada's recovery plan to get our budget back to balance over the course of the next decade, focused on getting people working again, helping highly impacted sectors, helping people struggling about getting into the first home in the GTA. We have some great programs for first-time home buyers to help them take some of the foreign money out of our rising real estate environment by banning non-resident foreign investors from buying real estate in Canada for at least 2 years till we can get our market settled out. And John, we will fight any effort to try and tax people's primary residence. We want to see people get a break. We want taxes to come down. That's why we're going to balance the budget and have a balanced approach to our economy.
Our next question is from Mrs. Irwin, and it talks about national defense. Mrs. Irwin.
Yes, Mr. O'Toole. My question is, there's not one party that is talking about anything for the budget for the defense of our forces. My husband is was a highly decorated naval person, and the current frigates are, I think, now coming up to 40 years old, 35 years, and the cost of refurbishing them are well over the billions. The submarines are 35 years old that I think we purchased from Canada or from England are 20 years old, and there'll be a hell of a price to refurbish them. And I'd like to know what you're doing about the defense for our country. There's not
Great
one
question.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mrs. Irwin, for that, and thank you for being part of a military family and for your husband's service. I respect military families and have tried to support them since I left the military myself. I got married. I met my wife while I was serving in the Air Force and sailing with the Navy in Halifax. I met my wife. She was just about to graduate from King's College, and we didn't have kids, but we were an early military family. And so when I left the military, Mrs. Irwin, I helped start a charity called the True Patriot Love Foundation that supports military families and veterans. So this means a lot to me. I want to invite you. I refer to my plan a lot. I carry it around a lot. Page 97 has our commitment to defense. We have to give our men and women in uniform the equipment they need to do the job. I know about the frigates you talk about, Mrs. Irwin, because I sailed on one. I sailed primarily on HMCS St. John's, the pride of Newfoundland and Labrador. I had an incredible time serving alongside incredible Canadians, doing fisheries patrols, landing on Hibernia off of our Atlantic coast, serving and training with our allies, the Americans, and with our allies in Norway and in NATO. It was an amazing experience. It made me an even prouder Canadian, and we need to give our men and women what they need, both in the Army, Air Force, and Navy. We have a plan to do that in a way that's effective. We also need more support for our Arctic sovereignty. And I would like to fix the procurement mess once and for all, because I flew on the Sea King helicopter as a navigator. The Sea King was canceled while I was a cadet at military college, and we were still debating it when I got to Parliament Hill 20 years later. So we need to fix procurement, and we've got a plan to do that. So thank you for a question that's kind of right up my alley as a veteran.
Our next call is about foreign affairs, but before I call on that questioner, I want to encourage everyone who has just joined us. You can press *3 to ask a question directly to Erin O'Toole, the leader of Canada's Conservatives. Our next question, though, is from Ian on foreign affairs.
Hello, Erin. Hope you're doing well. I'm a resident of Durham. My question is about foreign affairs. I was disappointed to see that that's not a topic on the leaders' debate. Particularly because I'm concerned about the lack of presence of Canada on the foreign stage, and particularly the dismal performance with respect to Afghanistan. And I'm wondering what you might be able to do about that.
Ian, that's a great question. Erin.
Well, thank you, Ian. I'm fortunate our moderator here tonight was a great foreign affairs minister when Canada was respected on the world stage for standing alongside our allies and standing up for our interests and our values. That's what we need to do as a country. And the situation in Afghanistan, Ian, was terrible to see. Tragic for the women and girls on the ground to see the Taliban, after 20 years back in control. It's been heartbreaking for our veterans and military families who feel a deep connection from the war in Afghanistan. And here is the tragedy. Mr. Trudeau called an election in the middle of a pandemic with forest fires in BC and complete chaos in Afghanistan. And for months, and in some cases years, veterans, NGOs, Canadians were telling the Trudeau government that we needed to get people out of Afghanistan that were at risk because they helped Canada. Interpreters, contractors and their family, at risk because they served alongside our men and women, our diplomats. In fact, for several years I've been advocating, trying in a nonpartisan way to get some of these people back. Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Sajjan, Mr. Hussein have completely ignored these pleas. And like everything, Mr. Trudeau only acts when things are literally in a crisis. There's no leadership from Mr. Trudeau. And I think Canadians deserve a prime minister that is more than just announcing things. We need action. And I'll tell you, with respect to communist China, with respect to Russia, the situation in the world, Canada needs a strong voice that will work alongside our allies to stand up for our citizens, like the two Michaels who've been in prison for over 1,000 days now in China, and to stand up for human rights in a way that we saw from Brian Mulroney's fight against apartheid, pushing the world for better. I think Canada needs to be a strong and dependable voice again, and I will make sure Canada is if I'm fortunate enough to become Prime Minister.
Our next question is from Christopher in Oakville about the economy. Christopher.
Thank you. Hi, Erin. I worry a lot about the debt that's been built up over these last, even prior to the pandemic, that the country is going to have to carry for many, many years, and understand the need to sort of invest in the country going forward. But I notice your plan calls for about a 3% growth rate, and I know that it's been a long time.
Are you still there, Christopher?
I think we might have had a technical issue, but let's talk about economic growth.
All right. Well, two things there. He was talking about the 3% growth rate. We do want to see high growth. We do have an ambitious, but I think achievable plan for growth, because we're not going to be ideological like Mr. Trudeau, trying to transition natural resources, transition parts of our sector, telling people in southwestern Ontario, this was Justin Trudeau saying, you need to move past manufacturing. Well, I'll tell you, as someone that grew up with a dad working in the auto sector in Ontario, we need to make sure that we're competitive. We need to make sure that we don't see China manipulate global trade for steel and aluminum. We should be working alongside the Americans to regulate that. We should see intellectual property developed in Canada. So we have an amazing innovation program. So we're confident we can see that capital on the sidelines and the $160 billion of capital investment that left Canada under Mr. Trudeau's watch. We know a lot of that wants to come back if they see a plan to get the economy back on track. And then, Christopher, with respect to the debt, you're right. Pre-pandemic, Mr. Trudeau put on about $100 billion worth of debt in good economic times with largely strong employment numbers that he inherited from us, really. He put on debt and was running massive deficits when he said he'd never have a deficit more than $10 billion. So like everything, Mr. Trudeau says one thing and does the opposite. And I'll tell you, in Oakville, we have Carrie Colburn, who a leader within the chamber, great private sector experience, will make a fantastic MP as we implement our recovery plan to get the budget back to balance, to start tackling that overspending, to keep pressure low on costs and taxes, to give families in the GTA a break. That's our commitment.
Well, our next question is from Frank, who has a question about children with disabilities. Frank.
Hi, Erin. How are you today?
I'm well, Frank. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Definitely support you 100%. Glad you're there. I hope you win. One thing that I'm concerned about is kids who become adults that have severe disabilities and really can't help themselves. Their parents typically choose one to continue with their career while the other one has to stay home to take care of their kids 24/7. But there's really nothing in your plan or in your platform to improve their lives or give them a little bit more benefit so that we can plan for their future when we're not here any longer. You did have something in your plan about increasing the accessibility to the federal disability fund that's there now, but these kids just need more, and there's nothing there for them right now.
Great. Children with disabilities, Erin.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. And, you know, one of my first meetings with a constituent as a brand new MP was on this very issue with respect to kids with autism that were growing and becoming adults, losing some supports, and parents wondering how they could provide for their kids. So I want you to know, in our plan, we do have a series of commitments. At page 134, we're going to double some of the benefits with respect to disability. We're going to make more families eligible for the disability tax credit. That was something Mr. Trudeau a few years ago tried to change to make less families eligible, and we worked alongside some advocacy groups to actually fight against those changes to make sure that they applied, because that eligibility for the disability tax credit can also impact the registered disability savings plan, which is something that was very important to the Conservative government that John and I were a part of, something the late Jim Flaherty, our friend who was finance minister from the GTA, from Whitby, that was very, very much in support of, making sure that we're giving families flexibility to help. Because about 1 in 5 families lives with someone in their family with a disability. So Frank, we want to have a strong economy, in large part so that we can make sure that we can take care of the vulnerable, take care of our neighbors, and build strong communities. So our relentless pursuit of employment and economic growth is so that we can keep a generous safety net there to help people. So I'd invite you to look, Frank, because we do know that families with children that are aging, that have disabilities, need support, and we want to be there for them.
I'm just going to remind everyone you're listening to Erin O'Toole, leader of Canada's Conservatives. If you'd like to ask a question of Erin directly, please feel free to press *3 to ask a question. Our next question, though, is from Bob from Aurora, who wants to talk about Liberal scandals. Bob.
Are you there, Bob?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that. Well done, Mr. O'Toole. You're running a very good campaign with your team.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's still a lot way to go, so we got a lot more hard work to do.
Are you, Mr. O'Toole?
Yes, can you hear me, Bob?
Yes, I can. Sorry about that. I just want to say congratulations. You're running a very, very good campaign with your team. And I'm a little bit puzzled about some of the issues that are being discussed. Like, for example, in the last couple of years, the Liberal government has been mired in some controversial issues with regard to charity. Like, for example, the We charity. There was a lot of money spent on that issue, and nobody seems to be held to account on that. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. And what?
Great question. Thoughts on Liberal scandals?
I've always got time to talk Liberal scandals, John. No, but in all seriousness, Bob, it is very troubling when we have a Prime Minister that has been investigated 3 times for his ethical conduct. You know, there used to be an approach that the ethics rules were there without sanctions attached to them, because if you were a public official, there was an element of shame with being found to have breached the ethics laws. There appears to be no shame. The first ethical scandal, the trip to the private island, it wasn't just Mr. Trudeau and some close family members. He took other MPs. He took the president of the Liberal Party. There's a culture of entitlement around Mr. Trudeau and his close group that has just not faded. And we saw that with SNC-Lavalin. We saw that with the We charity. And while the finance minister, the previous one, Mr. Morneau, resigned, Mr. Trudeau seems to never take responsibility for his conduct. It's always someone else's concern. It's always a misunderstanding. The problem starts at the top. Leadership is about setting the example. And what example does he set for his team with his own conduct? That's why in our plan, Bob, we're going to have tough new transparency and accountability laws. We're going to actually have major sanctions for someone who violates the ethics rules, especially multiple violations. And the scale will go up based on how many times you've broken it, your economic background, and the offense itself. We're going to have more transparency so that groups that are lobbying for these contracts, as we've seen groups like the We charity do using friends and close access. They weren't registered to lobby. They should be. And a company should never be lobbying to get out of some sort of criminal or court-ordered inquiry. That's the SNC-Lavalin situation. Remember, Jody Wilson-Raybould resigned and is leaving politics in large part because she wouldn't do what Mr. Trudeau wanted with respect to a criminal prosecution. So we need to clean up the mess in Ottawa. There's really been a drift of this unethical conduct, and we need to restore people's confidence in our public institutions, from the Prime Minister's office itself to the Canadian Armed Forces, which I love as a veteran, that's been mired in Mr. Trudeau's cover-up of allegations of sexual misconduct. So we're going to have transparency and accountability, and that second pillar of our recovery plan is about accountability and restoring trust in government.
Our next question is from Sandy in Burlington about an Aboriginal issue. Sandy.
Yes, hi. Good evening. I want to know why the subject of Aboriginal people is not even being raised, to my knowledge, so far. I want to know why Aboriginals still to this day, after promises from Trudeau in the last election, to make sure that they have running water. There's 16 places still with no running water. And I think Canada...
Running water.
Thank you very much for the question, Sandy. The one thing I can tell you is I believe there will be portions of the debates over the next 2 nights in French and English on Indigenous reconciliation. It's also the first question I asked as opposition leader in the House of Commons was on reconciliation and a call to action. And this is somewhere an issue that's so important, particularly after Kamloops and Cowessess and the reminder of just the tragic history we have on residential schools and quite frankly, failing Indigenous peoples for a century and a half plus. So I have no doubt Mr. Trudeau cares deeply about reconciliation, as I think all the leaders do. But I will often say that when you make a commitment, when you make a promise to end boil water advisories, for an example, and you have no plan to actually do it, a political promise, that's a backward step for reconciliation. So I want to build partnerships and make sure that we build trust with the federal government, which is, quite frankly, going back through our history, all parties have failed here. So let's build partnerships to achieve the goal of having safe drinking water on all reserves. Let's build partnerships to achieve that. That's my record. That's how I tried to approach my time as Veterans Minister. Always having a plan, never suggesting you could do things without a plan to get there. And I think that's been one of Mr. Trudeau's major problems, promising whatever he feels people want to hear, but he's not accountable to actually deliver on it. That's what I think a Prime Minister needs to be, especially for Indigenous peoples.
Our next question is from Nancy from Whitby, who wants to talk about gun bans. Nancy.
Hello, John, and hello, Mr. O'Toole. I would like you to clarify your stand on assault rifles. We're getting the impression that the Conservatives are just right-wing nuts so far as the assault weapon stance is concerned. Could you explain what you're going to do and why?
Sure. I'm glad you asked that question, Nancy. We will keep the restrictions in place. The assault weapon ban, the restrictions from 2020 in the Order of Council, we will keep in place. What I've said for some time is we need to take the politics out of decisions about how firearms are classified. It needs to be based on fact and objective review so that politicians aren't using this to demonize hunters or farmers, for example. What happens is, and we've seen this with Mr. Trudeau, he will do that while ignoring the big issue facing our cities, which is a huge rise in street gang and organized crime shootings using illegally smuggled firearms from the United States. So I've proposed in our plan an approach to tackle that by working with police, by working with border officials both in Canada and the United States to stop this flow. If you speak to police, they will tell you that has been the major increase over the last few years, has been from illegally smuggled firearms. But look, Nancy, you're in Whitby. I grew up in Bowmanville. I'm a suburban dad that I want to make sure we have safe streets and communities, cities, the suburbs and rural communities. That's why I've been clear. We're going to keep the restrictions in place. We're going to have this review of our classification system to try and depoliticize this issue. Mr. Trudeau is trying to bring in American-style attacks. And let's give law enforcement, municipalities, the tool to go after these street gangs, which are causing brazen shootings in Toronto, in Montreal, and Vancouver. That is the approach we're going to take, focused on public safety and security. And I want you to know, in Whitby, Malia Shahid, our candidate, is a counselor, a business person, a mom. She shares my view. We need to have safe communities, and this will be a priority not just in the GTA, but across the country.
Our next question is about taxes, and it comes from Robert. Robert. Are you there, Robert?
Good evening. Yes, I'm here. Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
Erin?
Hi, Robert.
Okay. Hi, how are you? I've got so many subjects I'd like to talk about, but I know I'm limited. One is HST on groceries. That's a slap in the face to everybody. We have that. We go to the gas pumps. We're taxed on everything on that with the carbon tax and everything else that's on there. How much tax can a Canadian senior afford to pay? What is the percent? Why is all this money coming in? Is it to build a bigger population of civil servants in Ottawa? What is the problem here?
Well, thank you, Robert. This is something that I think Mr. Trudeau doesn't think about too often, which is there's only one taxpayer. And when you keep taxing and taxing and increasing, and Mr. Trudeau has done that with incomes, he's done that with small business. He took away some of the tax-free savings account room that seniors have had. He put on automatic increases on taxes like excise and alcohol are going up automatically. He's tripling his carbon tax. There's a tax on a tax within the carbon tax. And you're right, there's a fatigue. And for seniors on fixed income, they can't compete with this rising inflation and cost of living crisis and taxes when pensions are flat. So what we've done in Canada's recovery plan, we want to give people a break. We want to fight against the cost of living crisis, in part driven by Mr. Trudeau's inflation. So we're going to have more competition in cellular and in internet to get prices down. We're going to introduce a grocery code of conduct and put pressure to have more downward pressure on groceries as well. We want to make sure that people get a break in December. We're going to have a GST holiday that will help consumers. At the end of the year, it's been a tough year and a half for our country, but it's also meant to help bricks and mortar retailers as well. We're going to give, as I said earlier, working Canadians, we're going to double the working Canadians benefit to make sure that some seniors, as they're transitioning out of the workforce, get more of their hard-earned money in their own pocket. And we want to make sure that government gets back to balance in a way that's fair without driving up taxes on Canadians. So, Robert, I hear you. The only option in this election is more of the same with Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh, more high spending, more high tax, or a Conservative plan to secure our future.
Listen, if you're just joining us, you're talking with Erin O'Toole, leader of Canada's Conservatives. You can ask questions on Facebook as well, but if you want to ask a question directly to Erin, you can press *3 to ask a question if you've just joined us. But Erin, our next question is from Mohammed about the issue of Islamophobia. Mohammed.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Mohammed.
Hello. Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I hope you're well.
Yeah, inshallah. I am praying for you. Hope you are going to be a next Prime Minister on September 20th.
Thank you.
So the reason for my question is there are two questions. One is like kind of, I believe in Islamic faith, but I am seeing it so many Islamophobia everywhere. Even recently also in the place where I am working also, there's a mosque close.
Are you still there, Mohammed?
We must have a technical issue.
Okay.
But Islamophobia, what about a plan to combat Islamophobia?
Well, I want to thank you, Mohammed, for the support and the question. And one of the really darkest parts of the pandemic, it's been a really tough 18 months for our country, but the rise of intolerance, of acts of racism, of Islamophobia, of anti-Semitism, has been really the pandemic, the shadow pandemic within COVID, and we have to fight against it. That's why really my first time leaving Ottawa in months was to go to the vigil in London, and I'm glad that all leaders were there to send a signal that when a family's out for a stroll on a Sunday night, they should not be subject to hate and violence that shocked the country, and we have to stand together. So we will work with organizations like the National Council of Canadian Muslims and others to try and make sure we play our role. I'm very proud, as you may know, Mohammed, in Whitby we have Malia Shahid, already an elected councillor who is our candidate. We have Nadeem Akbar in Milton. I said when I became leader a little over a year ago, still in the pandemic, I said I wanted the Conservative Party of 2021 to tackle the challenges and opportunities of Canada in 2021 and to have a cross-section of people from all backgrounds and communities to make sure that the Conservative Party and our plan includes and engages everyone. And I want to send that signal loud and clear. And Mohammed, I want to work with the community to make sure that we fight back against Islamophobia and all signs and all examples of intolerance that we've seen, sadly, on the rise.
Don from Richmond Hill, you're on with Erin O'Toole.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, Don. Hope you're well.
I am, and I'm telling you, you already have my vote. But my question is, would you support Canadians using Canadian oil at Canadian prices rather than buying oil from a country like Saudi Arabia?
That's a great question, Don, and I often think that not enough folks across the country, particularly in our region of the GTA, know about how much of a leader Canada is when it comes to energy and when it comes to getting carbon emissions down, when it comes to partnering with Indigenous leaders and communities. Every barrel of energy, every rare earth mineral, every timber, every piece of lumber that is Canadian that you take out of the global supply chain, who does replace that? You're right, it's countries like Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Russia. I think Canada can be global leaders in what's called ESG, environmental social governance. I add an I for Indigenous partnership, where our energy can be some of the lowest carbon intense, the highest standards of human rights and workplace practice, and support economic reconciliation for First Nation communities. That's my goal, Don, and this is why I think we have to make sure, and this is part of Canada's recovery plan, that every part of our economy recovers. Every Canadian family, including those working in Fort McMurray, in our energy sectors in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, Labrador, they deserve a COVID recovery as well, not just Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh, build back better, we're going to approve these jobs and we don't like these jobs. Let's try and make sure we recover as a country, we get the economy moving, and we show continued leadership on reducing emissions, making sure our extractive sector, our natural resource sector are leaders. They are already. I think the developed democratic world should only be using energy resources from a country like Canada. And our climate change plan will meet our Paris targets. We'll work on reducing intensity of carbon emissions, but make sure that all parts of our country have an economic recovery. That's our commitment to you.
Erin, Betty from Georgetown has a question on childcare. Betty.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. How are you?
I'm well, Betty. Hope you're well, too.
Thank you. The Ontario Liberals are pledging to have universal child care for all families at $10.
Did we lose you, Betty?
We've lost Betty. Betty had a question
Let's
on
see if we can
childcare and the
not lose
Conservative
people. This is a good opportunity for us to contrast what Mr. Trudeau is promising and what we're going to commit to delivering. The Liberal Party has promised national daycare 9 times. They've never delivered, and even what Mr. Trudeau cobbled together just before the election is something that will apply to some families 5 to 6 years from now. What we want to do is support all families with childcare supports and help them immediately. And on top of that, we want to give the most support to the lower income families who are already juggling the cost of living crisis that, our first question, Jillian, a senior, talking about the rising cost of groceries. Family at the lower income levels are falling behind under Mr. Trudeau. So we will pay 75% of the cost of childcare for folks in the lower income levels, and will help all families, giving them the flexibility to make the decision on what works best for them at this time right now. Some families that are on shift work or live in a suburb or a more rural part of Ontario would never qualify for what Mr. Trudeau is proposing to give some families 5 years from now. Let's help all families immediately. And Betty, our approach is meant to also help lower income levels the most. I think most Canadians want to see that. They also want to give families flexibility. So we think parents should be in the driver's seat, and they need help now, not 5 years from now.
Razali wants to talk about losing jobs to China. Razali, you're with the leader of Canada's Conservatives, Erin O'Toole.
Hi, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, my question is regarding all the workers, the manufacturers in this country that we heavily with China. Like we're losing jobs and we depend so heavily on China. And we pay high price for the stuff.
You're 100% right.
That was my question.
You're 100% right. And this is something I've been talking about because it's hurting working families. Families in Hamilton, for example, working in the steel industry. Families across southern Ontario, in Markham, in Durham, in St. Catharines, that are in the auto parts industry. We're seeing Mr. Trudeau sign trade deals that actually have allowed Chinese aluminum to be shipped to Mexico instead of Canadian aluminum to make auto parts that should be being made in southern Ontario. And as we see more electric vehicles, more hybrids, more and more aluminum is going into cars. And this is a sector that's critically important to the Ontario economy, and we're seeing it being hollowed out by very poor trade and economic policy of Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau has not worked now with 3 presidents in the U.S. on a joint approach with respect to Chinese steel and aluminum. I will make sure we have a serious approach to balance global trade where the communist leadership in China has been gaming the system, transshipping and hurting Canadian jobs, hurting our competitiveness. We need free and fair trade, and primarily amongst countries that follow the rules. And so we need to align with the U.S. and allies like Australia and others to rebalance the situation. That will help us, particularly steel fabricators across southern Ontario. That will help us in Hamilton and in Sault Ste. Marie. The aluminum in Western Canada and in Quebec is some of the most environmentally low emission aluminum in the world. We should make sure that we support these industries through a fairer approach on trade. And I'll tell you, the Conservative government will support an economic recovery in all sectors. We're not picking and choosing. We want to see this economy rebound. We want to see Canada a place to invest in again. And we have to have a serious approach with respect to trade and to work with the United States to counterbalance the negative impacts of China.
Janet has a question about universal health care. Janet, you're on the air.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Erin. I would like to, first of all, mention that it's been a pleasure listening to you tonight because it's obviously apparent that you're on top of things and you have a good platform. And quite frankly, I'm tired of a prime minister that was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, has no respect for the country's purse strings, and a former drama teacher who was, very well evident on his trip to India. So having said that, I would like to know what your theory is for universal health care going forward.
Well, thank you, Janet. I think we need a prime minister that actually has a plan to follow through on what they say. And I think people are constantly kind of disappointed by Mr. Trudeau, who will try and say what he thinks he needs to say, but never follow through. And part of what a leader has to do on everything from the economy to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, as per a question earlier today, right through to ethics and transparency. You have to have a plan, you have to deliver. That's what leadership is about. Anyone can read out a press release. It's about building a team and delivering for Canadians. And on healthcare, Janet, we've relied on our public universal system like never before in this pandemic. My respect for our nurses, our physicians, our technicians, our PSWs, people working in the system, particularly in the first wave, they must have been scared about the unknowns with COVID-19. Yet they went in. They were often trying to find PPE and masks on their own because Canada didn't have a national stockpile that was up to date. They worked for us. So that's why the first full day of the campaign, I launched Canada's Recovery Plan, which will make a once-in-a-generation commitment to our public universal system. Dramatically higher level of investment than Mr. Trudeau has offered. 6% minimum increase per year, stable and predictable, and without tying strings to it. We want to partner with the provinces, not pick squabbles with them, as Mr. Trudeau's been doing even through this election. That would represent over 10 years, Janet, a $60 billion commitment to rebuild, to allow provinces to give relief for some of our frontline supporters, responders, to fix some of the gaps in long-term care. Let's partner here. Let's not have Ottawa dictate. And what's been very disappointing, Janet, in an election, in a pandemic that I said should not have been called because of the fourth wave, Mr. Trudeau called the election anyway, and then was caught within days misleading people on social media about my commitment to our public and universal system. The first time a Canadian politician has ever been called out for manipulating public commentary and video on social media was Mr. Trudeau's pandemic election. I think Canadians deserve better. We've put forward a very transparent plan of supporting and strengthening our public and universal system.
We're going to do a bit of a poll right now, Erin. So the question is to all of our listeners. We're going to go back to Erin in just a moment, but I have a question for you. If Erin and the Conservative Party can count on your support, if they can, please press 1. If you are supporting another party, please press 2. And if you're not sure, please press 3. And now we're going to go to Chris from Mississauga. Chris, you're with us.
O'Toole, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. So I hope you're doing well as well.
I am. I just wanted to say, I think this conference call is a great idea. Whoever came up with this idea definitely deserves a raise. But I have a question also. A lot of the polls are showing that the most likely outcome of the election will be a minority government. If that were the case and there were a conservative minority government, could you maybe talk about some of the challenges you might expect in terms of implementing your platform the way it is? And also on the flip side, maybe some of the ways that you might find agreement and be able to work with some of the other parties as well to implement it.
That's a great question, Chris, and I will give a raise to our telephone town hall team because they are an effective way for me to take your questions live. *3 if you have a question for me, as John's been saying. We are running on Canada's Recovery Plan. So, Chris, the easiest way in the future that I will try and lead, if I'm fortunate enough to become Prime Minister, will be to execute on our plan. 1 million jobs in 1 year, focused on getting the economy back on its feet. That's our first pillar. The second, transparency and accountability to clean up the sort of ethical mess in Ottawa. The third pillar is on mental health and wellness. It's something I've worked on for many years. In fact, I've worked on a nonpartisan basis with Romeo Dallaire, a former Liberal senator, on mental health for first responders and veterans. So I've shown you can work across the aisle on issues that are important. The fourth pillar, being more prepared for a pandemic in the future. We were caught slow. We were caught without supplies. We were caught slow at the border. We don't have domestic vaccine capacity. We need to fix that. And the fifth pillar is to get back to balance over the course of the next decade. That might be difficult because Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh seem to think that they can spend with abandon forever, with inflation coming up, with risks of interest rate increases. But my approach in this campaign, Chris, will be to talk about our recovery plan, to try and earn the trust of Canadians. And this is what we think we should be moving forward on. And I'll tell you, after 18 months of a health and economic crisis, the worst we've seen, we need a plan to address not being ready on vaccines. We need a plan to deal with the rising rates in depression in young people, the terrible rise in domestic violence rates. We're showing some leadership here, and that will be our roadmap in the future.
Our next question is Patrick from Richmond Hill. Patrick, you're on the air.
Hi, Mr. Erin, is this you?
Hi, Patrick. Yes, it's me.
Hi, I just want to say I love the platform, the positive campaigning you're doing. It's a very strong platform, and I'm a big fan of these telephone town halls you're doing. I think it's a great change for campaigning, but I know we have limited time, so I'll just cut to the chase. So my background is I'm a working professional, a young working professional working in tech and software, and I have a little bit saved up, and I would like to invest it in the Canadian economy, specifically in Canadian businesses. But I'm a little bit worried about the capital gains tax in this country, and I'd love to hear your opinion on what you would do to encourage more young working professionals to invest their money into Canada instead of, say, America or Europe or something like that. And as a bonus question, I'd love to hear your position on cryptocurrencies.
Well, thanks, Patrick. The first question, I'm glad you've asked this question in terms of where to invest, because I think there has been two sides to this pandemic. Some people are hanging on by a thread, and we want to try and help them. And that's Canada's recovery plan is going to focus highly affected sectors. Some restaurants and some services, salons in the GTA. I've seen some of the appeals on Instagram. They're heartbreaking because of health restrictions and other things. So we've got targeted help to help those businesses get back on the ground. At the same time, there's been some people that because of changes, no travel and other things, some people have accumulated some savings during this crisis. So we actually have a plan to merge the two. We will actually provide a credit, Patrick, if you're willing to invest in one of these businesses. This sort of Main Street, rebuilding Main Street tax credit that's in our plan is meant to try and help that encourage that investment, to help businesses get their footing again. We're also going to have loans to rebuild Main Street as well and help some of those family businesses that have taken on personal debt. I hear those stories all the time, and they can't even find employees now because Mr. Trudeau has just kept pushing measures down the road as he's been plotting an election. We need to get people working, and we need to save our main streets in the cities, in the suburbs, and in rural parts of the country, and our plan is meant to do that. I also think there's opportunity for you to invest in some of the tech startups you've been involved in. So we have issues like flow-through shares to help startups scale up in Canada, and we want them to develop intellectual property here. So we've got incredible ideas to achieve our economic growth to get this country back on track. In terms of cryptocurrencies and these sorts of things, we will have to work very closely with our trading partners, our allies, our neighbors, our friends, the United States, to make sure that we have stability to our financial system and to our monetary system. So we're going to have to watch very closely decisions made by central banks around the world.
Great. Erin, climate change is an important issue for many Canadians, and we have Gail from Oakville who has a question on that issue. Gail.
Yes, I'm very concerned with the most important thing facing our world, our civilizations, the challenge to humans, is the significant changes happening in the weather. And this is affecting the agriculture, the lack of farmers' inability to grow in drought or in floods and prices. So why is there no real acknowledgement, leadership, helping Canadians understand what the impact is going to be and how we have to work together to counter these changes? I'd like to hear your opinions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gail. This is a very important question. And the one major policy that the Conservative Party released before this election that wasn't saved until the campaign was our climate change policy that I released in April. I did that for two reasons. One, we had a very detailed policy, and I invite you to page 76, 77, our detailed plan to tackle climate change, work with provinces, work with emitters, work with sectors that can offset like forestry and agriculture and others. But the second reason I put it out, Gail, and I'll be honest, we didn't meet the expectations of Canadians in the last two elections on climate change to meet our emission targets. So we took the time to work with some of the leading climate change consultants in the country to try and come up with a plan to achieve our emission targets, to meet our Paris commitments, but to minimize the impact on our economy, to actually make sure we can have an economic recovery after COVID. We took the time to get it right, and our plan has a price on carbon, but it has a low carbon personal savings account. So that price is kept with the consumer, and then they can use it to actually shrink their own carbon footprint. Our plan allows people to have an idea of what your carbon footprint is. We also have incredible detail on electric vehicles and partnering with the provinces on technology and a whole range of issues. But Gail, this is the thing, I think you nailed it. We have to work together, all levels of government, industry, and sectors of the economy that can sequester and actually help us achieve offsets of emissions as we're reducing emissions in higher exposed sectors like energy and manufacturing. We need a serious plan. Mr. Trudeau has never made his commitments on emission reduction as Prime Minister. He makes claims like he'll never change his carbon tax rate, and then he triples it. We've got a plan that can meet our objectives, but get the country moving again, because I often say, Gail, without a strong economy, without people working, without us getting our country back on its feet after COVID, we can't tackle climate change and some of the inequalities and other issues we need to work on as a country.
Our next question is from Jane, who wants to talk about how you will work as Prime Minister to incorporate diverging views. Jane.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. So my husband and I live in Milton, and we've both traditionally voted Liberal. We're both incredibly disappointed with the leadership and the current direction of the party. I think of Scott Gilmore's article recently in Maclean's that talks about folks who go to Ottawa to be something versus folks who go there to do something. If you are elected Prime Minister, how would you incorporate kind of divergent perspectives and views from all MPs, given the fact that you, A, might have a minority, or B, no one has a monopoly on good ideas. So how would you work with other parties to try and make policies that are best for all Canadians?
What a great question, Jane, and I appreciate you asking this, because I came to Ottawa as a backbench MP years ago, so proud to represent my hometown in Parliament. I'm not from Milton, but Bowmanville, kind of a similar on the other side of the city, and I was raised to try and work hard than to help others. That led me to join the military. It led me to do my charitable work when I worked in the private sector. And when I got to Ottawa, I would work with other parties, as I said, on mental health initiatives. I always tried to say you can have vigorous debate and then have a beer afterwards. In fact, I have friends on all sides of the aisle. I'm very proud to be a Conservative, and I'm very proud of Canada's recovery plan. But most importantly, if I'm known for something in Ottawa, it's about bringing people together and trying to accomplish things. I think the worst thing a Prime Minister can do is make promises without any plan to get there. That's why there's such cynicism in politics. Being Prime Minister is not about you. It's about Canadians. Whether it's at home tackling inequalities, tackling reconciliation, getting our economy back on track, or whether it's on the world stage. I'm representing Canadians, not myself. So you have to fight for workers. You have to fight for the two Michaels. You have to stand up for human rights, that I would like Canada to return to that position of leadership that we saw with Mr. Mulroney, for example, on apartheid, pushing the world for better. I think Canada is a remarkable country. I think our best days are ahead of us. But after this crisis and with the complex world we have, we need leadership and we need a plan. And Jane, you're the exact type of person I want to get to know, because my commitment to you is to work to build a great Canada and to tackle some of the issues of our time with a strong economy and a positive outlook.
Our next question is Peter from Whitby, who wants to talk about housing. Peter.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for taking my call. I want to know what I hear through the grapevines from my account that, I don't know if it's PCs or Liberals, are looking to come after us, people on their principal residence for capital gains. Is this true?
Peter, this is a concern we hear all the time. And I'll be straight with you. When we've confronted the Liberals on this, they've claimed that they have no intention to do this. Our concern is they do have CMHC looking at it, and CRA has been tracking property values, and some of the economists and thinkers that advise the government and the minister have been encouraging it. And when we see no plan to balance the budget before 2070, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, it has us very worried that Mr. Trudeau's calling an election in the pandemic, hoping that he could run on that issue and run on demonizing me or whatever. He's not running on any real plan, so I'm just basing it on what I've seen. And then he's really leaving the decisions until after the election. He thinks he deserves a majority. I think Canadians deserve a plan to know what a government will do to tackle the economic fallout from COVID-19, to restore faith in federal leadership, the military right through to the Prime Minister's office, how we're going to tackle some of the inequalities and challenges from COVID on addiction and mental health front, how we're going to be more ready, and how we're going to get our finances under control. That's our plan, Peter. And right now, the housing crisis, I couldn't afford a home in Whitby or Brooklyn these days. Clarington, my area, Milton, all these areas in the GTA are being priced out of the reach of people that grew up there that may want to own a home. And we shouldn't give up on a generation to have the ability to own their own home and then save for retirement with that home. So we would always fight against any measure to tax principal residence. That's how most people accumulate a very nice nest egg for retirement. We also want to give you a break on some of the pressures of inflation that we've seen in the last year or two, by getting bills down, by giving a bit of a GST holiday, and making sure that we tackle some of the folks that are working at the lower income levels, give them a doubling of the Canada Workers Benefit, other things to make sure that people get ahead by working, not extending the CERB and other things indefinitely that's causing challenges in our economy.
Listen, we're going to get back to Erin in just a moment, but now I have a question for you. If Erin and the Conservative Party can count on your support, please press 1. If you are supporting another party, please press 2. And if you're not sure, please press 3. Our next question is from Ryan in Burlington. Ryan.
Hello.
Hi, Ryan.
I have a good day, sir. I have a problem that comes with regards to old age. We seem to have a two-tiered system now, a system from 65 to 74 and a system from 75 and above. I mean, we came up with this $500 situation paid to anybody over 75. Now the raise coming in next July was also for people over 75. What about the people who've already retired at 65? They've got to wait 10 years to get anywhere going along? What is your plan for this?
Thank you, Ryan. And this is something we've heard from a lot of people, how unfair it was that Mr. Trudeau created this kind of two tiers of being a senior. He provided no reason for it whatsoever. And of course, the cynical person in me, which lately with a lot of Mr. Trudeau's actions, I'm very cynical. The fact that he paid out this payment and called an election shortly thereafter, that seemed to be an attempt to bribe Canadians with their own money at a time that he's also run up about $500 billion worth of debt. What we have to do is help vulnerable seniors. And I've talked about this, Ryan, especially seniors that want to stay in their own home after they lose a spouse. They see all their costs the same, but their income, because of the loss of a partner, goes down dramatically. And with inflation, as Jillian said right off the top, seniors who are on fixed income are falling behind already because of inflation. And we see property taxes and everything else going up, and they see static. So what we need to do is try and leverage, use a guaranteed income supplement, use some of our skills to help, our tools to help people that are vulnerable. And then across the board, we need to give some relief. So Canada's recovery plan, Ryan, is about making sure we give you a break, starting off in December with a GST holiday to get some purchases done, give people a break and help retailers. We also have some policies meant to put downward pressure on some of the monthly bills that all families and seniors on fixed income face. We want to give you a break and tackle this overspending by Mr. Trudeau that is leading to more and more tax increases by the Liberals and more of this two-tier approach rather than try to be fair. So Mr. Trudeau's never explained exactly why he's doing this, but it has a lot of seniors concerned that he's created these two different categories just for his own political purposes.
Great. Our next question is from the great town of Markham, and it is Sharon. Sharon from Markham.
Good evening, Mr. O'Toole. My husband and I are avid conservatives, and of course you'll get our vote. We're concerned about all the money that Mr. Trudeau is handing out for free to young people who have no incentive to go to work. And so we have a friend whose son is a chef in a restaurant, and he's working 60 to 80 hours a week because he can't hire staff. They say, thank you, but we're making more money staying home. When is this handout going to stop? These are my old age dollars that are being paid to these people who that aren't incentivized to get out and work.
Well, Sharon, thank you for the question, and I want to thank, through you, that chef. I've been amazed by speaking to people, especially in hospitality, but in tourism, in services, how extra work has gone on the shoulders of a smaller number of people because of the inability to hire people. So people are burning out, like you said, that chef working 60 to 80 hours to try and have the business operating. Particularly in the GTA, we saw so many restrictions because of COVID that they want to, as we say, make hay when the sun is shining. The restaurants, the salons and everything is open, but everything's going on their shoulder, and there's burnout. That's completely unfair. The biggest failure of Mr. Trudeau in the course of the COVID response programs was not adapting and learning over time. We were there as the opposition to support setting up the programs like the CERB, like the wage subsidy. In the first wave, when we were scared that there was maybe an economic collapse, we had to have the back of Canadians, and we did as the opposition. But we, over time, tried to get the government to see the reality of COVID for the second and third waves, where some big businesses, some sectors like grocery, were having record profits, and other restaurateurs and others were hanging on by a thread. We needed to change the programs. And there was no need, quite frankly, to put students onto the CERB. We recommended expanding the summer jobs program, expanding grants, expanding a number of ways that could have also helped businesses and some of the folks struggling while helping students at the same time. It was inappropriate for them to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on 15-year-olds who were dependents of their parents. That's not a smart way to allocate help in a crisis. But this is Mr. Trudeau's approach. He doesn't lead from the front. And Sharon, one thing I can tell you from my experience in uniform to my experience working in the private sector and understanding how you have to respond to the needs of the economy, we will not make those mistakes, because his approach has caused that chef to be hitting burnout. It's also caused our deficit to be much, much higher than it needed to be in this crisis. So we have a plan out of this mess, Sharon. It's called Canada's Recovery Plan, to get the economy working, to focus on work, and to get our budget under control, back to balance over the course of the decade.
COVID is obviously a huge priority for Canadians. So our next question is on that topic from Alexandra. Alexandra.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Erin. First, I want to just say thank you for inviting me to this, because it's nice to hear everything that you've been saying tonight. And I mean, I was going to vote Conservative anyways, but now you've really convinced me. And yeah, so it's nice to hear everything that you've been saying. My question is COVID. I'm tired of it. I don't want to go into a fourth wave. And I've been seeing in the news that you've been promising a very high 90% rate of vaccinated people, and just wondering, how are you going to get there?
All right. Thanks for a great question, Alexandra, and thanks for your support. If you are more supportive now after listening to the town hall, tell a friend, because we still are trying to make sure that we get our message, get Canada's recovery plan out. And vaccines are critical in our fight against COVID-19, the most important tool. And I often tell the story about how my wife and I taped our vaccination process and promoted it to try and help people get vaccinated. Some people have questions, some people don't like needles. There's a whole range of issues. We need to let people know that they're safe and effective for use. And what is frustrating for me, when we tweeted out that video, Mr. Trudeau complimented us, because he knows for a year I've been pushing for vaccines faster. We need quicker access. We need to get it to the vulnerable, our seniors, Indigenous communities in remote parts of the country. He knows I'm very much in favor of using vaccines. So in this election, he's tried to mislead people to suggest I'm not. That's not how you bring people together during a crisis. That's not leadership, Mr. Trudeau. If people have concerns about vaccine for whatever reason, we have to work together, not have an us versus them in a crisis. So our plan to get there, let's give people time off to get vaccinated. It's just as important as voting, for goodness sake. It give you time off. We'll get your ride there. Let's educate. There are some communities that have had bad experiences with the public health system in the past. Let's try and overcome that. These are personal decisions related to health, and we have to respect people. And I think informing them, answering questions, educating in some cases is far better than forcing or intimidating. We need unity in a crisis. And that's why I'm happy when Mr. Singh agreed with that approach and suggested all leaders should do a video promoting vaccinations. I was the first to sign up. Anything we can do to work together, because I'll tell you, Alexandra, I'm tired of COVID too. All families have felt the strain, some extremely. Some families have lost family members. So we all have to play our role, using vaccines, using rapid testing, distancing, masks, all these things that were so commonplace now. We all have mask collections in our house. Let's fight against COVID together as a country.
Listen, our time is coming to a close. We have time for another 2 or 3 quick questions. Let's go to Jerry, who wants to talk about small business. Jerry.
In the York region and Durham region areas, right now there's a very high demand for employees. But you even go to the employment services. They say, oh, well, we have nobody wanting to work. How are we going to get our young people and our workers to go back to work so we can get employees? This is my main question.
Well, thanks, Jerry. This is exactly what we need to focus on, getting people an opportunity to work, to succeed, and then ramping down programs that are encouraging people not to. You know, the issue you're talking about, Jerry, in the York region is what I see in Quebec, what I've seen out west. There are jobs, there are opportunities, but because we haven't adapted the programs to meet the current needs of the workforce, Mr. Trudeau is just kicking the can down the road with respect to the economy. It's completely unfair, as we said earlier in Sharon's question, the chef working all the long hours. So we have to wind down the support programs responsibly, making sure that there's no huge flare-up of COVID or something like that, because we have to take care of folks, but we have to make sure that it's more advantageous to work. And we've actually provided some incentives to employers to actually boost employees and to get a bigger boost, the jobs boost we're calling it, if they hire someone who's been unemployed or off work for more than 10 months. So we have an employment insurance program. We have to get back to the structure our economy is used to having, which is job opportunities, searching for job opportunities, and having people's back through an effective EI system. We've also suggested we need to expand EI to make it longer for someone with a serious illness. We're also going to provide some more supports for grieving families and make our EI system more compassionate. But we have to get working again as a country. That's why the Conservatives, we launched Canada's Recovery Plan on the first full day of the campaign, Jerry. We need to get the country working, back on its feet, back on track in all parts of the country, and I can't stress it enough. We need a plan of action after COVID-19, and that's what a Conservative government will implement.
Erin, we have a question from Christina in Mississauga who wants to talk about the divisions in our country. Christina.
Good evening, Mr. O'Toole. Thank you for taking my call, my question. I wanted to talk a little bit about restoring trust in government. Our current and acting Prime Minister is, I would say, breeding hate amongst his people within his own country and ultimately creating a fracture in communities. What will you do to restore and mend that fracture and essentially help Canadians from all walks, so from Liberals, Conservatives, everyone, band together to defeat and get over this horrible pandemic that we're all in?
Thanks, Christina. First, I would say, as much as I have disagreements with Mr. Trudeau, I don't think he's promoting people to hate one another or anything that severe. Do I think there's more division after 6 years of Mr. Trudeau? Absolutely. Do I think he often takes an approach that will pit rural versus urban or west versus east? Yes, I do. And I think that's why he needs to be replaced as Prime Minister. I think the most important job of a Prime Minister is national unity and keeping the country focused on moving forward. Have a strong economy, tackle inflation, give people opportunities to work so that we can have a strong economy to bolster our healthcare system and to tackle inequalities and issues we face. Even in this campaign that Mr. Trudeau called, all the other leaders were saying, in fact, we had a vote in Parliament to say there shouldn't be an election during the pandemic. He ignored all of that and called an election for himself. And then he's tried to use vaccines, he's tried to use manipulated statements on me and other issues to divide people. I don't think that's the hallmark of a leader that wants to unite people towards a goal, which is let's get through COVID together. So that's my approach, Christina. I want to heal some of the national unity rifts. I often tell the story about meeting a veteran in Alberta who wants to give up on a country he served because he feels that his province has been abandoned by the Prime Minister of the country. I've said, let's use the remarkable democracy Canada has to unite the country again. And I think Canada's Conservatives, we have a new leader, we have a plan of action for our country, and I'm trying to run a positive campaign because I believe in this country, I believe in its people, and I think our best days are ahead of us. But we need a plan, we need an ethical government focused on the well-being of Canadians, not the well-being of people around the close friends of the Prime Minister. So that's my approach, Christina. Let's unite, let's have a plan, and let's have a strong and true north, strong and free.
Erin, our very last question is from Mary, and Mary wants to talk about housing in the GTA. Mary, you're on.
Oh, thank you for taking my call. I've been waiting the whole hour. Thanks, Erin. My problem is the escalating price of homes in the Toronto GTA area. I think part of the problem may be the fact that investors from out of the country are purchasing multiple properties and holding them while they're being built, and when they're built, the prices naturally have gone up, and then they've put them on the market or wait a little bit longer, leaving them vacant in order to make some more profit. And our own young Canadians cannot afford to purchase a home, and I really think that should be addressed, and perhaps we could keep these people from investing in Canada and driving the prices up in the Toronto area. Thank you so very much for taking my call.
Well, thank you so very much, Mary, for being patient. If you were on this call, because I know we have thousands of people across the GTA, thank you for being patient. I'm glad we're ending with you with a question that comes up all the time, especially in the GTA, especially I was just in the lower mainland of BC with my family, housing and people being priced out. Two categories: first-time home buyers. We've got a generation of young people almost giving up on home ownership, and we've got to give them that chance. And also seniors, Mary, I hear a lot about folks that want to downsize and they can't afford the home, the smaller downsize, and they're worried about eating up all their retirement egg because there's just been such pressure. So we have a very detailed housing plan put together by our team, including a young housing shadow minister I have who's done great work here. And our centerpiece of it is tackling exactly what you've said, Mary. We're going to ban foreign non-resident buying of homes in Canada for 2 years and then review it in 2 years, because we know it's having an impact, particularly in the Vancouver region and in the GTA, and there is no reason for it. If someone is not ever intending to live here and participate and pay taxes and start a business or work, they're just pricing out Canadians from their own community. That's completely unfair. And Mr. Trudeau put a 1% surcharge on these foreign transactions. We're going to ban them. Mr. Trudeau voted against our efforts to push this months ago. We will act on this as part of our multifaceted plan to tackle the housing crisis. We're going to actually free up federal lands and properties to help. We're going to focus transit money on building density and accelerating supply. We're going to have changes to mortgages to help first-time home buyers. We're going to build more purpose-built rental housing, because there's a rental housing crisis in the GTA as well. So, Mary, we hear you loud and clear. We launched this at the beginning of the campaign. We will deliver on Canada's recovery plan.
Well, thanks, Erin. Canada's Conservatives are ready to deliver Canada's recovery plan and stand up for GTA families and, frankly, for all Canadians. That's why I'm glad you're leading Canada's Conservatives in this very important election. It's time Canada had a Prime Minister from the GTA, someone who understands the challenges that you and your family are facing, because he grew up here and he's raising his family here. We hope you found tonight's conversation useful. If Erin O'Toole and Canada's Conservatives can count on your vote, we ask you to please press 1. If you're supporting another party, please press 2. And if you're still unsure of how you'll vote, please press 3. If you did not have a chance to ask your question, please stay on the line and leave a message for our staff. Your question is tremendously important, and we'd like to take the chance to respond to it.
Well, first off, thank you, John, for being a great host and a great public servant. It was always great to serve with you, and I appreciate your friendship and advice. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, particularly people like Mary, who stayed on the call a long time. We've been speaking to thousands of people. We've talked about the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, taxes, the debt and deficit. We've talked about reconciliation, healthcare, the environment. All of this we cover in Canada's recovery plan, and the country deserves a plan and a government that will deliver. We can't afford more of the same, more hollow, empty promises by Mr. Trudeau, who always lets us down and doesn't deliver. Too many Canadians across the Greater Toronto Area, across Southern Ontario, have been left behind by Mr. Trudeau and by the NDP, who have no chance of getting our finances back under control and tackling the housing crisis. It's time we get the GTA and its economy back on track. We can work together to lower prices and costs for families. We can tackle the housing crisis. We can build more public transit. We can make record investments in our public healthcare system. and we can secure the future after very difficult 18 months for our country. We deserve unity and a plan forward to make sure that Canada lives up to its great potential for all citizens. Please check out our website. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Check out Canada's Recovery Plan online. And if you have any questions, we want to earn your trust, we want to earn your vote, please get in touch. Thank you for taking part in our telephone town hall tonight. Best wishes of health to you and your family. Be well. Good night.